started designing for the startup on top of the business development. We were doing landing pages, websites, full-on brand redesigns. And I really started to find a passion for the actual physical design space. I was only a semester away from graduating with my degree in marketing, and I put it on hold, and I started 6 more semesters to go back and relearn the principles and the theory of design. I changed my minor to a web and graphic design, finished my marketing degree, graduated, and post-graduation, I ended up at a company called Elevati, where they own adoption.com, adoption.org, again, a passion of mine. And there I ran a design team and a social media team. I was able to kind of blend together my love for marketing and my love for design and put them together. Learned a lot of cool things about growing social media campaigns, but again, was able to take some principles that I learned in my marketing career and apply them to design. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a second. But after Elevati, I ended up at another startup. That one is here in Utah, where I am currently. And this startup was specializing in app design and development. Over the course of the 3 years that I was there, we launched and put about 20 different apps on the App Store for both iOS and Android. They were kind of niche community apps, apps for all different types of communities. We did apps for cat lovers. We did apps for truck enthusiasts. We did apps for motorcycle or fishing, yoga, healthy eating, all these different kind of niche communities we launched these apps for. And across kind of the breadth of those apps, we garnished somewhere in the neighborhood of, I don't know, 500 to 600,000 users across those over the 2 years, 2-3 years we were doing it. So a lot of fun success. And I attribute a lot of that success to my background in marketing. Again, when I was in school, UX design wasn't a term that was being readily used. It wasn't something that had a lot of formal education around. So how I stumbled into UX was really taking my background in marketing and applying it to design. You know, we would start, and any of those projects that I just mentioned, instead of arguing over what color button was going to work, I would just throw out the idea of, hey, let's just do both and we'll A/B test it. Again, A/B testing, a principle and concept that I'd learned in my marketing degree. We would tend to try and rush out some sort of MVP product, and I would like to slow down. I would say, hey, can we focus a little bit more on personas and jobs to be done? And can we back it with some research done in surveys, interviews, focus groups? Again, all concepts that I was learning in my marketing degree and I was now trying to apply to design. And it wasn't until a couple of years later that I realized that what I was doing was what we're going to call today UX design. And so that was kind of my route into UX design. It was through these startups. It was through marketing. And then here I am today. I work full-time for a company called Domo, where I, as Krishan mentioned, I'm the lead mobile UX designer. We work in cross-functional teams, which means I've got developers that I sit with, QA that I sit with, product managers that I sit with, as opposed to just sitting with all of Domo UX designers and all of Domo developers in one room. We kind of sit together in cross-functional teams as to facilitate what I think is a healthier, more efficient product cycle. Additionally, on the side, I've ran my own, what I guess we would deem a agency. It's been a freelance project of mine, and with that freelance stuff that I've worked on, I've worked with somewhere in the realm of 50 to 100 different clients, and I threw up a couple logos just to show some of the breadth that I got to work with. I guess just for fun, I'll pick one out. I don't know if you can see this one in the bottom left. You'll see a brand called Incredible. Again, just with some head nods. Any of you guys familiar with Nick Cannon? You know Nick Cannon? Maybe you've caught him on Wild and Out, or you've caught him in, I think one of his more popular movies was called Drumline. I got to work with Nick Cannon on multiple occasions. We did different apps with him. I guess that's as close to celebrity work as I've ever been able to do, if you can consider Nick Cannon a celebrity, I guess. But just a lot of cool experiences. And with that, I wanted to try and capture a lot of those experiences in what I now run as a podcast. So for the last year, I've ran a podcast, and I've had a lot of different guests from clients and then from just industry professionals. And there too, I try and capture a bit of what I'm learning and document it there in podcast and YouTube form. So that's a bit about me. That's a bit about my background. And now I want to jump into what we're really all here for, what I hope is going to be influential for you guys joining, is what I kind of put together is what I wish I knew before I hired you. Over the last 2 years, I've been able to meet with hundreds of people in similar situations like you guys, where you're either in school and you're preparing for a career in whether it's UX or development. I've been able to meet with these individuals and understand a little bit about what's on their mind, where they're headed, what do they struggle with, and it's really been enlightening for me. I've phone interviewed close to 80 or 90 different individuals in the process of building our mobile UX team at Domo over the last couple of years. And in person, I've interviewed somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 different individuals. I've had a lot of opportunity to meet with people and understand a couple of the things that really make somebody attractive from an employer standpoint, who is hireable, who is talent that we want to bet on. And I kind of boiled them down to 3 points, and which we'll get into in a second. But before I get that, I need to lay some groundwork. The market in which you guys are going to be entering once you get out of Lambda School is going to be different, obviously, in each area. But let me speak specifically to what it looks like right now in Utah, because obviously that's what I'm more familiar with. Our workforce right here has completely been flipped when it comes to laws of supply and demand. 5 years ago, when the term UX was really taking off, everyone in this valley was looking for UX designers, and that caught a lot of people's attention. Therefore, a lot of people went into school to become UX designers. Boot camps started popping up. Online schools started popping up. I've even seen 1-week courses to becoming a UX designer pop up. And what it's done is it's kind of flipped the laws of supply and demand. At this point in time, there are so many designers entering to the field, and there's just not as many jobs opening up here in Utah, in this valley, for all the supply that we have. So it's created kind of this surplus of designers who are sitting around twiddling their thumbs going, what do I need to do in order to start getting experience and build my resume or build my experience? Because everybody says I need to have experience, and I just can't even get my foot in the door. It's a problem that maybe you guys will see as you get closer to graduation, or maybe you're seeing already. And I want to talk a little bit about what I would deem hireable, and to help you guys stand out as you're starting to approach, your first job after school. And it's going to start with a couple different stories. I was on the phone just last week with a student who's here at a local university. He had posted something online, which I had responded to, and he in turn wanted to chat with me on the phone. He was concerned about his resume, and he was concerned about the work that he was doing in school, if he could deem it professional experience, because at school they were working with professional clients. And he wanted to know if he could start counting that as, I'm working professionally, I've been doing this for a year because we've got people who are paying for it. Can I call it professional experience to get a couple years under my belt, because all these job applications I'm filling out ask for a couple years of experience? And my response, I don't think, was something that he actually wanted to hear. It was, I think let me just jump into this. I think he's over-optimizing. I think he's spending too much time focusing on these details that have got a little return, but not as much as he may be thinking he is. Whether you call it school experience or professional experience, I don't really care. As somebody who's going to view his resume, it is what it is. I mean, I don't like trying to have the wool thrown over my eyes as if he's going to trick me into thinking he's got professional experience. I know he's just graduating from school. Whatever you want to call it, I don't care. What I told this student was, what's more important than over-optimizing your resume and over-optimizing your portfolio is getting on the phone like he was doing and meeting professionals, getting on the phone and creating relationships. This student, his name was Jay. I said to Jay, at this point in time, I'm more likely to hire you or help you find employment because you've reached out and because you've had this conversation. I now know you and would be willing to stick my neck out for you. So instead of over optimizing on your resume, figuring out what bullet point is going to catch a recruiter's attention more, don't worry about it. You need to have a resume. You'll need to have a portfolio. I get it, but it's a baseline. What more can you do? And this is what more I think you can do. If you understand and implement these 3 soft skills, I think you're going to put yourself in a much more attractive position to some recruiting manager or hiring manager. I'm going to start this with a story, actually, before I get into the first point. And this story actually comes from last summer when I opened up 2 different internship opportunities at Domo. It was going to be on our mobile UX team. It was internship level, so I didn't expect a ton of experience. And I put out these job openings or internship openings to the local community through meetup groups, and just whatever different networking groups. And I got a tremendous response. There was probably 60 to 70 emails within the next 2 weeks, all with somebody's resume saying, I'm interested in the internship. And I was floored. I had no idea what to do with all of these resumes. And I felt the tremendous amount of pressure because as I was piloting this internship program for Domo, I really didn't want to screw it up. And I knew if I hired the wrong people, that was going to reflect on the piloting program. So I felt tremendous amount of pressure to find the right talent to fill these 2 internship spots. But where would I start with 70 to 80 resumes to go through? Where do I start? I've got about 10 resumes in, and I recognized the first hurdle that you guys are going to encounter, which is on paper, without any experience, everyone looks identical. Those resumes look identical. And no, they may be visually a little bit different, but when it comes to the content, everyone looks pretty close to the same. So I said, all right, I'm not going to be able to pick an employee or an intern based upon these resumes. So I looked at portfolios. And here's the second hurdle you run into. All the portfolios looked the same, right? All these UX designers were coming out of school. They had learned how to put together a portfolio. They've read Medium articles. They've watched YouTube videos. They've done whatever studying up they can do. And they've put together a portfolio that honestly ends up looking identical. It contains 1 to 3 different school projects, maybe 1 or 2 projects that they've done for a family member or a friend. Here's just a side note. A couple of them really tried to stand out with putting together a case study. And little did they know that case study they thought they were going to stand out with, all of their peers were doing the exact same thing. So even where they thought that they could differentiate, they weren't differentiating themselves enough. So again, I'll go back to that first point about over optimizing. I think that your resume and your portfolio are going to be baselines. But if you can understand and implement these 3 soft skills we're going to talk about, I do think you can start to stand out from the rest of the pack. Let me share a quick story. This was now with 2 individuals who I was interviewing at the exact same time. Now, some of us would think that's a little bit mean. Why would you interview 2 people at the same time? That seems unfair. But these 2 guys were friends. They had just come out of a boot camp together. It was after a local meetup event, and it was just convenient to do it. So they had some questions. They wanted to learn about the internship. I was happy to do it. And both of them were qualified candidates for the job. They were qualified interns. But what really changed and what made the importance of soft skills start to stand out to me was in their emails after. Of course, after an interview, you should send a follow-up email. I think that's pretty standard. It's pretty common knowledge at this point. But their emails were different. The first candidate responded to me and said, hey, Dillon, thanks for the job, the interview opportunity. Thanks for answering my questions. Thanks for taking your time. I feel confident that I could contribute to your team in a way that you're looking for. And I appreciate any opportunity that you could give me. Great. It's a good email to send. The second candidate, though, was a little bit different. He said, Dillon, thanks for your time. Thanks for answering the questions. I appreciate what you're trying to put together. And then here's where he differentiated himself. And it was so natural and so genuine that it kind of hit me right in the chest. He said, Dillon, I recognize the hard opportunity that you have to make, the hard decision you have to make. I know the other candidate. I've worked with him in school. I've worked with him in different projects. And I know that if you're trying to decide between me and this other candidate, you can't make a wrong decision. You won't have any buyer's remorse. Like I said, he's a great candidate. Not to say that I don't want the job. I would love the opportunity, but you can't make a wrong decision. And when I read that email, it just, like I said, just hit me right to the core. In fact, when I read it, I almost got a little emotional because I was like, that is the exact personality, the exact character of somebody I want on my team. Somebody who really needs the internship opportunity, but was willing to put somebody else ahead of him, spoke volumes about his character. That's the caliber of the talent that I want on my team. And from there, it kind of created a year and a half's worth of work in which I've been diving into these soft skills that I think we don't focus on enough. We're in school and we look at what programs we should be using. We look at the process. We looked about how to do research and interviews and yada, yada, yada. And all of that is good, no doubt, but we don't talk enough about the soft skills. So let's just jump right into it because I think I've taken enough time setting it up. The first soft skill that I want you guys to be able to take away from this is you don't have to have all the answers. As somebody coming out of school and you're looking for either an internship or associate job position, you don't have to have all the answers. UX is problem solving. It's not art. It's not anything other than just problem solving in a visual manner, no doubt, but it is problem solving. And I don't expect somebody coming into my internship program or an associate level position to have all the answers. And when you get okay with that fact, real cool things can start to happen. Let me give you an example. You're in an interview and in the interview process, you're showing maybe some of your work, or maybe you're doing a design challenge for this company and you get posed a question from the interviewer and they ask you something that really is kind of a little bit complicated. You don't know how it would pan out, but you're tempted because in the interview, you want to seem, smart. You want to seem like you've got it together. You throw out an answer out of thin air. Honestly, in those 30 some interviews that I've mentioned I've done over the last 2 years, more often than not, people want to do that. But what I find more attractive is when somebody says to me, you know what, Dillon, that's a great question. And I don't know. What I would like to do is, go do a little bit more research, try and study that out a little bit further, understand the different use case scenarios, and then maybe come back with an opinion. I could take a guess that, this might work, but truthfully, I don't know. My opinion would be just as good as anybody else's in the room. That speaks volumes to me. Again, because I'm not hiring you to have all the answers. I'm hiring you to discover the answers. I'm hiring you to become a facilitator of the UX process, a facilitator who's going to sit into, a meeting with different stakeholders, whether that's development, product management, even executives. And instead of putting out your answer, you're going to take in all these different viewpoints and then figure out how they all work together and what can you sift through, what is valid and what can we kind of put aside. It doesn't mean you have to have the answers, but it means you discover the answers. So I like somebody who's okay with the fact that, Dillon, I don't have the answer, but I'd like to do this type of research or this type of work to identify the answer. I want to see somebody who's curious. And if you can demonstrate to me that piece in a phone interview or in an in-person interview, and then once I hire you, you show that on a day-to-day basis as we're working on projects, that becomes so much more attractive to me than somebody who comes in saying, I know what we need to do. Number 2, now you've landed the job and you are working on projects and you get this first bigger project where you're designing out maybe this, new user experience in whatever program, let's say it's a consumer app and you're going to do this really cool feature. I don't know what it is. It could be a variety of anything. The point is the same. You've done a lot of work on the project. And what I need you to do next is take me on the journey of how you discovered what it is what you deem the right answer is. The important soft skill I think for you to take away here is the importance of knowing how to articulate your thoughts. It won't do you any favors, and it won't do me any favors in turn if we walk into a meeting with stakeholders and we just throw up the final mocks and we say, here it is, this is what we need to do. Everyone in that room is going to look at those mocks. They're going to go, wait, what? Cool, this looks good, but I'm sorry, help me understand what we're doing here. If you don't articulate your thoughts and take those stakeholders on the journey, it's falling on deaf ears and you're not going to get the buy-in that you need. So being able to articulate your thoughts is going to help people understand how you got from A to B. So you start in this design process with some discovery and some research. Let me know what kind of discovery and research you did. You say, well, I understood that our job to be done was X, and I recognize that there's a couple different apps out in the marketplace that have done things similar, and I looked at some of those things. I discovered a couple of those pros and cons, and then trying to identify what correlates to what we're doing on, I had these takeaways. From those takeaways, I put together these wireframes. As I started to do a little bit of usability testing, I recognized that, you know what, not everyone was thinking of it that way, and we made these modifications. So on and so forth. Now I've arrived at your end product, and I understand the journey you went on. Because I understand the journey, I recognize you've covered all the bases. It instills trust with those stakeholders. And now when I go to look at these final mocks, I feel more confident that we are hitting the point that we're trying to drive home. We are trying to hit that job to be done, and we've nailed it because I can see kind of this process. Or on the opposite side, if we didn't hit the mark, understanding that journey, I can also pinpoint where we may have gone a little bit wrong. We made this decision right after the wireframe here. But at the same time, we could have gone this direction. And I wonder if going this direction would have landed us in a different spot. Because I've been taken on that journey, I can now pinpoint where it is that maybe we need to go back to. That's going to save time. That's going to be more efficient because instead of going all the way back to the beginning, we can know where we need to start over at. So that second point that I think that we need to, again, understand and learn that makes you more attractive is understanding how to articulate your thoughts so that you can take me on the journey of your design process. Number 3, our last one, becoming the master of patience. This one is difficult for so many different reasons, and it was hard for me to even put it into this presentation because this in and of itself could have been its own presentation. And so I'm going to cover a couple aspects of patience and why it's important as a soft skill and how it makes you more employable. But it does cover kind of a wide variety of where you need to be patient. Right now, you guys are at the beginning of a long career, or at least a long career, right? Hopefully you're getting into something that you're going to enjoy doing and you want to make a long career out of it. There is so much that you're going to learn throughout the course of this process. And I'm not talking the Lambda process. I'm talking the next 5 years of your professional career. There's so much that you're going to learn. Be okay with getting out of school and continuing to learn. There are UX professionals that have been doing it for 15 and 20 years who I know will all say they're still learning today. But we've got this mentality that I've got to keep up with the Jones. I've got to keep up with the other designers that are out there that are really making a name for themselves. And therefore, I need to be climbing the ladder at the same pace that they're climbing the ladder. It's just not going to be healthy for you. You're at kind of the first rung of a ladder that we need to climb, and there's no rush in getting to the top. At each one of those rungs, there's going to be more and more that we can learn. An example of it, learning to take and receive feedback requires patience. I can't tell you how often I see new designers step into some sort of development review, mock review, whatever it may be, and they start to get feedback or critique, and their immediate response is, this is an attack on me. And it's not. It's a collaboration effort to make a better end product, but it's hard to see. And sometimes feedback isn't always given, the most eloquently, where it does get a little bit personal, and that's on them. But at the same time, in patience, we can accept a little bit about what's happening, and we can go, listen, this isn't a direct reflection of me. This isn't going to change the future of where I end up going in the next 5 years, there's something that I can learn right here in this experience. And I think if you can do that, you're putting yourself in a healthy position. Another opportunity to be patient is with your job title. Job titles are something that people get so confused with because universally we haven't come up with how to give up job titles. A lot of it comes back to how an employer looks at job titles. And where I'm at Domo, they structured job titles so much differently than we structured job titles at the startups. And I actually saw how my job title at those startups hurt me when I was trying to find a more corporate and enterprise level job position. The example is that when I was at those startups managing those small design teams, they gave me this big fancy title of creative director. And I was so stoked on being the creative director at these startups, but it hurt because when I went to go to corporate world and enterprise world, when I was looking for opportunities like Domo, they don't need a creative director. They need a UX designer or a product designer. And they need somebody who's got 3, 4, 5 years of experience, which Domo is going to deem a mid to senior level UX designer. And that's what they're looking for, not a creative director. But I was so caught up in how fancy my title of creative director was that I didn't want to put it away. And it hurt me trying to find a job after the startup world. As soon as I started changing that job title on my resume from creative director to UX lead, which I felt was a little bit softer and a little bit more accurate to really what I was doing. I was working with a team and I was leading our UX experience. I started getting hit up by recruiters more and more often. Now, how that can also apply to you is that you're going to see your peers graduate from school and maybe they land their first job as an associate designer or a core designer. It can go by a lot of different names. But next year, they get a promotion to a mid-level designer. Or even crazier, they get promoted to a senior designer. And you're going, holy smokes, how are they already a senior designer and I'm still just an associate designer or potentially even an intern? Where have I gone wrong? And you start to compare yourselves to the other designers that are in the field and you're going, I'm just not adding up. Have you guys ever heard of the term imposter syndrome? I'm looking at head nods there. Do I see some head nods? You guys have heard of imposter syndrome. I think when we start to compare ourselves to other designers, and maybe even because of job titles, that imposter syndrome becomes more and more damaging. We start to think, he's a senior designer, I'm not a senior designer, I've done something wrong, and you know what? I need to now throw a fit. I need to start going to look for another job opportunity, or I need to go to my boss and say, hey, it's time for me to get a promotion. Slow down. There's no rush in titles. And truthfully, I don't think after a year you are a senior designer. And if you get kind of this arrogance of, I need the senior title because my friends are going to think it's cool and my parents are going to think I'm great, you're doing it for the wrong reasons. I would rather see a UX designer who's got an associate level title who comes in and blows me away in an interview than somebody with a year or two of experience with this big fancy senior title. And he comes in and I'm kind of scratching my head going, wait, how are you a senior designer? You're not demonstrating the skill sets that I would deem a senior designer to have. So be patient with those job titles. Don't get caught up in comparing yourself to your peers or those who are 12 weeks ahead of you or 6 months ahead of you or the Lambda class ahead of you. Make sure that you're comparing yourself to you and who you were yesterday. And if you're on the process or if you're in the process of just trying to become better every day, you're doing it right. Be patient. So again, just to recap, and then we're going to open this up for some Q&A, which I do hope you guys have some questions. I love the Q&A portion. I want to recap real quick. You don't have to have all the answers. Be okay with, as you're going into your first internship, associate level position, that they're not hiring you to come in with the answers to fix the business. They're coming you in to facilitate a UX process in which in that process, you will discover the right answers. Once you get your foot in the door, practice articulating your thoughts. You can start that now in your projects with your peers. Practice articulating your thoughts. We're always in a rush to say, well, we're in this meeting and everybody's talking up and I need to talk up too, so I want to get something out there. Process first what it is that you need to say. What is going to add value? and then figure out how you can take me on the journey adequately. And that's going to come when you learn to articulate your thoughts. And then finally, like we just talked about, become the masters of patience. Don't compare yourself to your peers or those who are a little bit ahead of you. Don't worry about your job title right now. Try and put that imposter syndrome at bay. And I think if you can learn to take feedback with a bit of humility and patience, you're setting yourself up to be so much more attractive to any design manager or hiring manager that you're going to come across. Does that make sense, guys? Cool. I appreciate the head nods. I'm looking over, seeing those head nods. I really appreciate your time and your attention here. Christian, is it okay if we open that up now for some Q&A?
Yeah, absolutely. We have a question, the question thread right away from Alexander Vargas. What interview questions do you personally ask when you're looking for a UX designer?
What questions do I ask? I don't have a set of questions that I ask. I typically, with our internship and associate level positions, I'll have them do a design challenge. Look at those design challenges not as homework that we're making you do. I just want to be able to see you tackle a process and then take me on that journey inside of our interview. If you can do that with a project that you already have ready, then I won't ask you to do a design challenge. But when somebody comes in for an interview, I want to see a project that they've been working on. So I don't have any formal questions already at hand I want to ask. I'm just going to poke questions around the project that they have. Now, I'll do a couple different things that I'm sharing you guys a secret. So if any of you guys ever end up interviewing with me later, you're going to be able to call me on my bluff. I've purposely asked questions that are really stupid. I've asked questions where I know that you just gave me the answer, and I'm going to ask the question as if I wasn't listening, because here's what I want to see. Are you going to treat me like I'm an idiot? Are you going to treat me like, didn't you just hear what I just said? How are you going to handle this situation when I ask a dumb question? So that's something I'll do. At the same time, I'll also ask a completely complicated question. I mentioned this before, and that you don't have to have all the answers. I'll ask a completely complicated question because I want to know, how are you going to handle this situation? Are you going to kind of come up with an answer and throw it out there, right out of your butt? Or are you going to take the time to say, oh, that's complicated. I don't have a good answer right now, but here's what I would want to do to try and discover that answer. So that's typically what I try and do in these interviews. I was also taught, and I'll just share this real quick. I was also taught by our chief of product. Her name's Catherine Wong at Domo. She's an amazing chief of product. She told me that when she interviews individuals, her measuring stick that she's using, because obviously the candidate says she's bringing in, they're qualified for the job. So whether or not she wants to hire this person and work closely with them, it's this one measuring stick right here. She says to herself, if I was stuck in an airport in a country that I've never been to, would I make it home in the next 24 hours? And would I make it home happily if this person was with me? And it's kind of a funny experience because if you join me on the Domo UX team, we're going to spend 40 hours a week together. And it's a sad fact of life, but that's more time than I get to spend with my wife. That's more time than I get to spend with my kids. And I spent months years trying to figure out who to marry. And I'm supposed to make a decision on who I want to hire in just one interview. There's a gamble there. And so I really try and look for personality. I want to know, how are these people going to handle these different situations? And can I make it out of this airport that I've never been to happily if this person was with me? I think is a great measuring stick. Does that answer the question?
I think that's great. I have another question coming in from Mark. And Alexander, if you feel like you want a follow-up question, go ahead and post into the thread. But Mark's asking, what are some example projects that we can work on outside of class or after graduation that might help them?
I mean, you're not going to like this answer. The answer is, I don't care. I don't care what project you do. I don't think there's a right or wrong project that you can do. I just want to know that you're doing projects. Now you might think, okay, but how do I find a project to do? And maybe that was your question you're answering. There's so many websites out there with example creative briefs or tasks that you can try and design for. Go to those websites and find a creative brief that looks interesting to you. Or you know what, even better, let me share this quick story. I gave this advice to a student who was coming out of a boot camp about a year ago. And he was going, you know, what type of project are you interested in seeing? And I, again, told him the answer, I don't care. I'm just find something you're passionate about and do it. And he had this idea of like, man, I want to have a smartphone app that does everything inside of my car. And he put together this fictitious project for this fictitious company. And he designed all the needed user experience for an app that, you know, could control locking, unlocking, starting your car, air control, radio control, all these different cool things. And it was fun. And he finished that project and realized that he still didn't have a job. So he's wondering, what next do I do? And here's what he did next. He found a developer and they started creating the app. And that right there shows me a lot of personality and a lot of soft skills. It shows me drive. It shows me hustle. It shows me willingness to work. Those soft skills, again, I'm looking for. So I don't care what project you pick, just pick something and show me that you've got those skill sets. I'm going to be pretty excited.
Cool. Awesome. Michael asks, should I be applying for entry-level jobs if my skill set doesn't match the job description? If so, approximately what percentage of my skills should I match before I apply? Do you have any thoughts there?
Great question. Again, I'm going to give a non-conventional answer because I've never once in my career landed a job by applying on a website. And so I'm going to go back to that first story that I shared with the student whose name was Jay, was trying to figure out why he was at 50 to 60 resumes submitted and he still hadn't gotten a call back. I said, Jay, pick up the phone and start networking, start making connections. And all the job opportunities I've ever landed, I met the person, I networked, I created a relationship. And before they hired me, they would say, oh, by the way, we need to have a resume on file. And that's when I gave them a resume. So what should you do about this resume? And what should you do about experience? And what do you need to match up? I would just offer this as kind of a counter to that. Identify those companies that you want to work for. Maybe they're in your local area. Maybe you're dreaming big and you want to go work for Google or Facebook. Or maybe you want to come work for Domo, whatever it may be. Figure out who's there. Figure out how you can network your way into the company. And it's kind of a game, right? It's almost a dating game, if you will, because how does that happen? It needs to happen naturally. It needs to happen kind of organically. But maybe you have identified Dillon at Domo and you recognize and connect with Dillon on LinkedIn and you see that every week he's putting out a new podcast. And on his podcast, you make a comment. I see that comment. I read that comment. I register that name. A couple weeks later, you do the same thing on another one or another piece of content. And I see your name over and over and over again. Now I get a message from you personally that says, hey, Dillon, I've been following along for a little while. I've got a couple of questions for you. Do you mind if I ask? Now we've got a personal connection. And I, like many others, am very willing to pick up the phone and chat with you. And next thing you know, now we're on the phone call. And then I put out a job posting that says, I'm looking for 2 interns. And you come back to me and say, hey, Dillon, I'd love that internship opportunity. Guess what? I've created a relationship with you. I know you. I know what you're about. I'm more likely to put you at the top of this pack and get you in on this internship. So what should you be doing? Perusing websites. I legitimately have talked to so many people who are approaching 80, 90, 100 resumes submitted and not getting callbacks. What do? I said, stop submitting resumes. It's not working. Make some connections, make some networks, find a mentor, see who you can connect with to help you get your foot in the door. That's going to do more for you landing a job.
Great advice. Next question comes from Sheraton. Have you ever done any freelance work? If so, do you feel like that is beneficial while waiting for a door to open in the corporate world?
Yes, I've been freelancing nonstop for the last 8 years. If you want to check out in fact, I can pull this one up. If you want to check out my website, winspeardesigns.com, I haven't done a great job updating it over the last year, but you can see some of the freelance work that I've been doing there. Wait till after this. Don't all go rushing to do it now. But yeah, I've been freelancing for the last 8 years. I probably freelance somewhere between 15 and 20 hours a week still on top of my full-time job. And the follow-up question should be is how? I don't know. I struggle with work-life balance, and it's a complete mess, but I'm passionate about design. So yes, I do freelance on the side. And here's some of the things that I think you can gain by doing it. If you start working in the corporate or enterprise world, you're going to recognize that things don't move as fast as they do at startups. And so you're going to kind of go, man, I really wish I could learn a little bit about something I'm not doing at work. For example, let's say you want to start learning a little bit more about AR, or you want to start learning a little bit more about app design because you've been primarily doing a lot of web design. Freelancing will give you that opportunity. Freelancing will give you the opportunity to work on practice projects, but these practice projects pay you money. So I love the idea of freelancing. Domo loves the idea of freelancing. They allow our creative team to freelance because they know that it just means that our designers are sharpening their skill sets. So freelance, get experience. And if you're at the point where you can now start charging for that freelance work, all the better. Fill your pockets. I'm not going to say that's a bad thing. But I also wouldn't shy away from ever doing free work. If you can see an opportunity, I'm not saying do free work all the time. You're going to be hit up as a designer. Your friends are going to hit you up all the time to do a logo for them for their next thing. Get picky about it. But if you see an opportunity to do free work with something that could really go somewhere, take it. Especially at this point in your career where you're going, you know what do I have to lose? Take the opportunity. Later on in life, you're going to have to do a little bit more measuring what's important to me, what's not important to me, what's my risk, where are my priorities. Yep, you'll have to go through all that, but don't shy away from free work just because they say they're not going to pay you.
Awesome. Since we're getting close to the end, I'm going to skip around a little bit on questions. There's a few more in here. From Denise, any advice you have for career changers who are new to UX design but have mid-level or senior level job experience in a different field?
That's a tough question too. In fact, just next week, I'm going to be recording an episode with somebody who's brand new to the UX career field, but has been doing sales and more marketing for the last 20 years. And they're going, how do I get into this? Truthfully, I'm going to say the same thing. Network your way into that job position, and then recognize that once you've networked your way into that job position, I recognize that you come with experience. Now, does your marketing and sales work relate to UX? It may or may not, but I'll be able to vet that out in the interviewing process. Is there a way to tout that on your resume? By all means, put that you've been doing sales and marketing for 20 years, and then you went back to school and you got a degree in UX. I'm going to see that on your resume. That does stand out. It's a little bit different than all the other resumes that I saw. And it might perk my interest. Absolutely.
Thank you. And then Olu asks, do you prefer video case studies to written case studies? If so, why? And how detailed should we solve take-home assignments when job searching?
That's a tough question. So the last time I asked somebody to do a design challenge, I noticed that immediately she rolled her eyes. Like, I don't want to do more homework. And I kind of told her why I wanted her to do it, in which she got on board. But when I ask for a design challenge, I tell you to time box it. I say, don't put more than 2 to 3 hours into it. And when you come in to present it, I recognize that not everything is going to be finished. And when you take me on the journey of what you did do, tell me where you had to make assumptions in order to continue moving on. Tell me where you had to say, yeah, I made this decision, but with more time, I would have gone to do this, this, and this. That's totally acceptable. I put you in the time box. If you're interviewing and they don't give you a time box, I don't know. I mean, I know guys that were interviewing with IBM and they put 16 to 20 hours into a design challenge. Your work will show 16 to 20 hours is going to show better than 2 to 3 hours. But that ultimately is going to come back to you. I would hope that when you're in that interview, ask them how much time you want them to spend.
Did you have any thoughts on if you've seen video case studies?
Oh, yeah.
Case studies?
I don't have a preference. The only reason I would like to see a video is because it allows me to see personality. Whether it's written or it's in a video form, the content's going to be about the same. I think the only added plus is I'm going to get to see you talk through it. And if I would have given you guys all this presentation in a Medium article, you would have scrolled through it and gone through the highlights, but in video form, it gets a bit more engaging. You get to see a bit more of my personality. The same is going to be true about your content. So if you have the time, go for it. I think it's engaging.
Awesome.
Can I say one more thing?
Yeah.
I've actually only over the last 2 years seen one person do it. So if you're trying to stand out, maybe that's a worthwhile way.
Awesome. Cool. From Kermit, he says, regarding patience, you mentioned that comparing yourself to others, specifically your peers, is not a healthy dynamic. Health aside, can it be an effective one? And can comparisons help you propel yourself faster and farther up the career ladder?
No doubt. I mean, at that point, I call it competition, right? And a lot of people thrive under competition. But in the spirit of competition, are you looking at it to better yourself, or are you looking at it to pound the other person into the ground? And that's where I think this imposter syndrome then starts to hurt. If you're looking at how good somebody else is doing, and then you're deeming your worth to be less than that, that's damaging. Your worth does not change depending on how well somebody else is doing. Your worth is consistent. Now, if you look at somebody else and you're inspired by it and it drives you to do something better, by all means, let it drive you. Again, I'll speak just real quickly to the podcast that I run. There are so many good design podcasts out there, and I am constantly inspired by it. I get a little bit competitive with it too, but I don't use that to diminish what I've tried to build, and I do use it to try and better what I'm doing.
Awesome. Let's take a follow-up question from Tom. What are you looking to find when asking a candidate a dumb question? What would be an answer that would satisfy you?
It's hard to say what the answer is to satisfy me. It's more of like the body language. It's more of the tone in which you're answering. If you brush it off, let's say you just answered my question, and then I asked you the same question you just answered, and you just say something rushed like, I would have done this. It's like, okay, sorry, easy. That's not what I want that's not appealing. That's not attractive. Nobody on this conference is going to say that. Oh yeah, that's what I'm looking for. I want to see somebody who is calm, patient, and is willing to say, oh yeah, no, yes, I would like to do that. And here's the answer again. Simply restate it. Don't get your feelings hurt. Just calmly answer it. Imagine I'm like, your 4-year-old kid who's asking dumb questions all the time. I've got a 4-year-old kid. It happens. Answer patiently. You've got nothing to lose by it. So just treat me as if, I'm either your 4-year-old kid, or treat me like your grandma, right? You wouldn't want to hurt your grandma's feelings. Either way, 4-year-old kid or grandma, just treat it and carry out that situation in a way that the body language says that question's acceptable. And you're happy to answer it again.
Awesome. So I think we have time for maybe one more question.
Sweet.
From Jubilee. So you mentioned you don't really care about what's on a portfolio, but if I make a connection to something else on my resume or portfolio or whatever, show you I'm more than another boot camp grad by having something actually unrelated, would that matter? Actually, I'm not sure if that question made sense to me. Does it make sense to you?
Well, I think I'm following along. Let me see if I can. You're basically saying I actually have something of quality. I have something that's more than just another school project or a family project. How do I get that to stand out in a sea of, portfolios that I'm gonna look at with just school projects and side projects? It's hard to make it stand out, because at the end of the day, it's important to you, but how do I know it's important to me? Or if it is a serious project and it's presented along the same lines as all your other projects that maybe aren't as impactful, or they're presented in the same way that your peers are presenting their projects, I'm just not going to know. So if there's any sort of differentiator in the visual, maybe you don't treat it as just like, a 3-column, here's case 1, case 2, case 3, and you've got a more full-on page on the the car app that you built and it's a full page of documentation as opposed to just another project piece, yeah, that might help it stand out. Treat it differently, and I'll recognize it as different. Maybe you do a video, maybe you brainstorm another ways though to make it stand out.
Great.
It's tough though. That one is tough.
Yeah, I think, yeah, you mentioned it's a baseline. You got to have these things, but you're advocating the soft skills and starting to reach out, network to.
And again, it's not going to be your portfolio that's going to land you the job. It's the portfolio will be the baseline. And I have done interviews with people who, other hiring managers, they say legitimately, I'll spend 10 seconds looking at a website and I just want to see, yep, it's there. Yep, it looks clean. I'll answer their questions. I'll call them. I'll make a phone interview. And so, you know, at the same time, if you've got something that's really cool, they're probably not going to get through all of it anyways.
Okay. All right. We've got to wrap up, but thanks so much, Dillon. Really appreciate you answering our questions and presenting these thoughts to us, because it's been really awesome.
Yeah. One last plug. If I didn't get to your questions and you want a question, please reach out to me on LinkedIn, send me a note and connect with me saying that we were part of the presentation. And I'm more than happy to chat with you and answer more questions.
Awesome. Really appreciate it. Well, have a great day, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks. Have a good one.